This is Holly Rensky, PA, dictating Friday, October 18th, around 4:15 in the afternoon, for Dr. Albrecht regarding patient encounters from October 14th through 17th, with some additional notes that aren't strictly clinical, but that I want on the record because I think they need to be on the record, and because I want you to look at them with me on Monday before I do anything with them. I'm going to start with the easy ones and work toward the hard one. Stop me when you listen back if any of this needs to be moved into a separate dictation. Patient 1. Marlene Tessier, 68, established patient, here on the 14th for her quarterly diabetes follow-up. A 1C down to 7.2, which is good for her. She's been at 8 or above for 2 years. Blood pressure 138 over 84, and which is fine. Feet checked, no ulceration, sensation intact. We talked about the new walking group at the senior center, which she is doing twice a week now. She volunteered without prompting that she had not been outside after dark since the equinox. I made a note of it in her chart, but did not ask about it because she said it the way people say they have been remembering to floss. Pleased with herself, looking for acknowledgement, not inviting follow-up. I gave her the acknowledgement. I refilled her metformin and her lisinopril, and we scheduled her for January. I want to flag for you that this is the third established patient this month who has mentioned, unprompted, that they don't go out after dark. The other two were Henry Vale, your patient, and Doreen Cribb Albano, who you saw last week. None of them framed it as a complaint or a problem. All three framed it as a routine. I don't know if it's seasonal. The days are getting shorter. People stay in. But the consistency of the phrasing is what made me note it. They each said after dark, and they each said it the way someone might say after dinner. Moving on. Patient 2. Russell Coombe, 41, new patient to me, has been seen here twice before by Dr. Penn back in 2021. Came in October 14th complaining of insomnia for the past 3 weeks. Mild irritability, mild loss of appetite. He works at the lumberyard in Sheldon, drives Route 14 home after his shift ends at 9. Vitals normal. He volunteered, again without prompting, that the insomnia started right around the time the clocks were going to be changing. The time change being still a couple weeks out, but he was already adjusting his schedule because the drive home from work has been getting harder, and he wanted to stop being on the road in the dark before it became a problem. His phrase. I asked what he meant by a problem, and he said, and I'm quoting from memory now, "You know how it gets." I said I was new and didn't, and he looked at me for a couple seconds, and then he said, "Well, it gets dark." I prescribed nothing. I recommended sleep hygiene, suggested he could come back in 2 weeks if symptoms persisted. He thanked me. Patient 3. This one I want you to listen carefully to. Charity Beaulieu-Donnelly, age 7. Her mother, Sarah, brought her in on the 15th late afternoon for what Sarah described as a behavioral thing. Charity is a healthy child by every measure I've seen. She's been in twice for well visits since I started. She's at the 75th percentile for height and weight. Social development is appropriate. She's reading above grade level. Sarah's concern was that Charity had been asking the wrong questions. The wrong questions, per Sarah, were questions about the rule. I had to ask which rule, and Sarah looked at me the way Russell Coombe had looked at me the day before, like I was being slow on purpose, and she said, "The road rule." She said it the way you'd say, "the seatbelt rule," to a pediatrician. Like everyone knows. I said I was sorry, I was new to the area. Could she explain? Sarah said the road rule was something kids in Briarden learned around age 4 or 5. The rule was that after sunset, if you hear someone calling to you from the road, from outside the house, from a car, from anywhere, you don't answer. You don't go to the window. You don't open the door. You don't say anything. You wait. I said, okay. I asked what Charity had been asking that worried her. Sarah said Charity had been asking what happens if you do answer. I asked Sarah what the answer to that question was in their family. Sarah said, in their family, the answer was that you don't answer because that's the rule, and the rule is what keeps everyone safe, and you don't need to know what happens because if you follow the rule, it doesn't happen. She said this calmly, in the way that I have noticed people in Brereton say things calmly that I would expect them to say with more inflection. Ooh, she said her own mother had told her the same thing, and her grandmother had told her mother. She said Charity was old enough now to understand that some questions are not for asking, and that part of growing up was learning which ones, and that Charity had been having trouble with this lesson, and that Sarah wanted to know if I had any guidance for how to redirect her daughter's questioning without, Sarah used this phrase, without making the question more interesting than the answer. I asked Sarah whether Charity had been showing other signs of anxiety or oppositional behavior. She said no. She said Charity was a sweet, curious kid, and the questioning was coming from curiosity, not defiance. She just needed Charity to stop asking, because the asking itself was, Sarah said, the part that drew attention. I want to be careful here, Doctor. Albrecht, because I know how this is going to sound on Monday, but Sarah said drew attention, and I asked her, drew attention from whom? And Sarah said very evenly, the road. I made a note in Charity's chart that I had counseled the family on age-appropriate boundaries around discussing safety rules, and that I would follow up at the next well visit. I did not make a note of the conversation about the road drawing attention, because I was not sure how to make that note in a way that would not, when read by anyone other than you, raise concerns about either Sarah's mental status or mine. I want to ask you on Monday what to do with that conversation. I want to know whether to add it to the chart, add it to a separate note, or leave it out. I want your guidance on this. Continuing. Patient 4, Dwight Henneberry, 56, Mosh established patient, came in the morning of the 16th for a recheck on his hypertension and to discuss what he described as a hearing problem. On exam, his ears were clear, both tympanic membranes intact, no fluid, no obstruction. I did the standard whisper test and he passed it cleanly in both ears. I asked him to describe the hearing problem in his own words. He said it wasn't really hearing. It was hearing things and not being sure if he had heard them. He said he'd been waking up the past few nights and lying in bed and hearing what sounded like someone calling his name from outside, from the road. He said his house is on Route 14, set back about 50 yards, with the bedroom on the roadside. He said it was always his name. He said it was a man's voice. And he said he'd lived in that house for 31 years and had never heard anything like it before. I asked him whether he had gone to the window. He said no. I asked him why not. He looked at me, and I want to flag for you because I think this is a pattern now. He looked at me the way the others had, the polite, slow look of a person who has been asked something that has an obvious answer that they were not expecting to have to articulate. He said, because of the rule, Holly. He used my first name. He's a very nice man. He has called me Holly since the second visit, and I appreciate it. I said, Dwight, I don't know about the rule. I'm new here. Can you tell me what happens if you go to the window? Dwight thought about this. He thought about it for a long time. Then he said, Holly, I don't know what happens. Nobody I know has ever gone to the window. That's the point of the rule. The rule means we don't have to know. I asked him whether the calling had stopped. He said no. He said it was happening every night now. He said the first night had been the 11th, then again on the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, and last night, the 15th into the 16th. He said he had not slept much. He said he was wondering if there was something I could give him to help him sleep through it. I prescribed 5 milligrams of zolpidem for short-term use, 10 tablets, no refills, with the standard counseling about not driving and not operating equipment after taking it. I told him to come back in a week if it wasn't working. He paid his copay. He thanked me. As he was leaving the exam room, he turned around and said, Holly, you live on Hatcher Road, right? I said yes. He said, that's a town road, not a state road. You should be all right. I said, all right with what? He said, with the rule. The rule is mostly about state roads. Hatcher Road is fine. He left. I want to record, for the dictation, what I felt at that moment, because I think it's clinically relevant to my next decisions. I felt, and I'm going to use a non-clinical word here, I felt managed. I felt like the patients in this clinic have been gently, kindly, professionally giving me only the part of the situation they think a newcomer can hold, and that the situation has more parts than the parts I have been given, and that the people giving me the parts are paying attention to which parts I am ready for next. I don't think Dwight told me about the state road versus town road distinction by accident. I think he was checking on me. I think he wanted to make sure I knew which roads were the ones I was supposed to know about. I am sitting in my office now, 4:15 Friday afternoon, and I am dictating this for Monday because I want you to hear all of it before I see another patient. I want to keep going. Patient 5. Wednesday night, the 16th, I was on call for the answering service. The service routes after-hours calls from established patients to whichever provider is on call. The volume is normally light. We get maybe 2 calls a night, mostly medication questions, occasional rashes, sometimes a worried parent. I got 1 call on Wednesday night. It came in at 9:43 p.m. The service patched it through to my cell. On the caller ID showed an extension I didn't recognize. The service operator, a woman named Lacey, who I have spoken with maybe a dozen times, came on first and said, "Holly, this is Lacey at the service. I have a patient on the line who says he needs to speak with the on-call provider. He didn't give a name. Are you available?" I said yes. Lacey patched me through. The voice on the line said, "Hi, Holly." I said, "Hello, this is Holly Rensky. Can I help you?" The voice said, "Yes. Yes, you can. I'm having chest pains." I went into the standard protocol. I asked his name. He said, "Just call me a patient." I asked his date of birth. He didn't give it. I asked where he was. He said, "I'm calling from the road." I want you to hear, Dr. Albrecht, exactly what I did next. I want you to hear it because I want your read on it. I did not hang up. I did not. I asked him to describe the chest pain. He said it was a pressure, central, radiating to his left arm. I asked him how long it had been going on. He said maybe 20 minutes. I asked him on a scale of 1 to 10. He said 8. I told him to hang up and call 911. He said, "Holly, I'm calling from the road. They won't come out here at night. You know that." I said, "Sir, I am not equipped to handle a cardiac emergency over the phone. You need to call 911. He said, "Holly, I just need you to talk to me. Stay on the line with me. Just talk to me until it passes." I said, "Sir, who is this?" I asked it directly. I asked it 3 times. He said the third time, "Holly, you know who this is." I want to record that the voice on the phone was a man's voice. Mid-range, no particular accent. Slightly tired. It was not a voice I recognized from any patient I have seen. It was not a voice I associate with anyone in my life. But the phrasing, "You know who this is," was a phrasing that, in the moment, I responded to as though I did know. I didn't say, "I don't know you," which would have been the truthful response. I said something else. I said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you over the phone. You need to call 911 or get to the emergency room in St. Albans." He said, "Holly, I'm closer than that. I'm right here. You can hear me, right?" I said, "Sir, this conversation is being recorded by the answering service. If you're in genuine medical distress, you need to call 911. If you're not, I'm going to end the call." He said, "Holly, are you home?" I ended the call. I want to record that I ended the call after he asked if I was home, and that I ended the call at exactly the right moment from a procedural standpoint, but that the moment of ending was not a moment of clinical judgment. It was something else. It was a moment of recognition that the conversation had crossed into a register I could not handle while on call. I called Lacey back at the service. I told her I had ended the call, and I wanted to know what number it had come in from. Lacey said, and this is verbatim because I wrote it down immediately after the call, "Holly, that call came in on the back line. We don't usually patch backline calls through. I'm sorry, I should have flagged it. I'll talk to my supervisor." I asked her what the backline was. Lacey said the backline was a number that the service maintains for, quote, kun specific kinds of after-hours calls in the Briarton coverage area. She said the number had been set up by the previous medical director, Dr. Penn, before he retired, and had been documented in the service's protocols since 2014. She said the protocol was that backline calls were not to be patched through to providers between sunset and sunrise, and that any backline call received in that window was to be logged and held for review the next morning. I asked her why my call had been patched through. She said she had made an error. She said she was new to the night shift and had not been fully trained on the backline protocol. She apologized again. She said it would not happen again. I asked her to send me the call log. She sent it. The call log showed the call coming in at 9:43 on the backline, it lasting 4 minutes and 12 seconds and being marked as patched in error. The originating number was a string of zeros. Lacey said this was normal for backline calls. The backline, she said, did not transmit caller ID. I asked her how long the backline had been in operation. She said since 2014, as best she could tell. She said the backline had been receiving calls, let me read what she said, at a rate of 1 to 3 per week, year-round, with seasonal variation, and that the standard protocol was to log the calls, hold them, and review them with the medical director on a weekly basis, and that this had been done continuously since 2014. She said the calls were almost always medical in presentation, but had been classified as a category as non-actionable. I am going to go back to the clinic on Monday morning, Dr. Albrecht, and I am going to ask you to show me the backline review log. I want to see the entries from the weeks before I started here. I want to see how they're written. I want to know whether you have been receiving calls from the backline for 10 years, every week, and reviewing them, and not telling me about them. I am not asking this in an accusatory way. I am asking it because I want to know what protocol I am inside of. Patient 6, Thursday morning, the 17th. Eleanor Boudreau, 83, came in for a routine follow-up. Established patient. She has mild congestive heart failure, controlled and some early dementia, also mild. She came in alone, drove herself, which is fine. She still has her license and her cognitive testing has been stable. We did the routine recheck. She was fine. At the end of the visit, while I was writing up the encounter, she said, "Dear, I want to tell you something." I said, "Yes." She said, "I heard about Wednesday night." I asked her what she meant. She said, "Lacey told her sister. Her sister told the women at the church. The women at the church told me, I want to tell you that you did the right thing." I said, "Mrs. Boudreau, I'm not sure exactly what you've heard, but I appreciate you saying that." She said, "Holly, you ended the call. That's the right thing. The rule about the road is the same for the phone after sunset. We learned the road rule first when there were just roads. The phone came later. The rule moved to the phone. You did the right thing." I asked her gently, because she has dementia, and because I needed to know whether this was a confused statement or a reflective one, I asked her how she knew about the phone version of the rule. She said her father had told her, and his father had told him, and that the phone came into Briarden in 1948 and the rule had moved to the phone within the year. She said the rule moved with the technology. She said when the cell phones came, in the late 90s, the rule moved to those too. She said the rule is the same rule. The medium changes. The rule is the same. I asked her again gently what the rule was. She said after sunset, if anyone calls to you from outside, you don't answer. From the road, from a phone, from a car, from a stranger at the door, from anyone. You don't answer. You wait. The waiting is the answer. I asked her if anyone had ever explained to her why. She looked at me with the very clear, very present eyes that some patients with mild dementia get when they're in a moment of full lucidity, and she said, "Holly, no one explains why. The why is the part you don't ask. The asking is what makes you the answerer. We don't want you to be the answerer." I made a note in her chart that the patient had been oriented and lucid throughout the visit. I did not make a note of the conversation about the rule. I am noting it now in this dictation for Monday. Patient 7, and this is the one I am having the hardest time writing up. Yesterday afternoon, Thursday the 17th, around 4:30, just before I left the clinic, my mother called. My mother lives in Schenectady. She is 64, in good health, a retired social worker, very practical, very grounded, the least mystical person I have ever known. She called me on my cell while I was finishing up notes. I picked up. She said, Holly, sweetheart, I had a strange thing happen, and I wanted to tell you about it. I said, okay. She said, last night, around 9 o'clock, the landline rang. You know we still have the landline. The caller ID said Brereton, Vermont, and a number I didn't recognize. I thought it was you calling from a clinic line or something. I picked up. She paused, and I could hear her trying to find the right way to say what came next. She said, Holly, the voice on the line was your voice. It said, Mom, it's me. I need help. I'm on the road and the car broke down. Your voice. It was you. It was completely you. And it sounded like you were crying. I was sitting at my desk in the clinic. I had not been on the road the night before. I had been at home on Hatcher Road, eating a microwaved enchilada and watching a baking show on my laptop. My car had not broken down. I had not called my mother. I said, Mom, that wasn't me. She said, I know, sweetheart. I know it wasn't you. Because you know what I did. I said, honey, what road? And the voice on the line, it didn't answer. It kept saying, I need help. I'm on the road. I need help. It didn't answer the question. It just kept going. So I said, honey, tell me what road, or I'm hanging up. And it kept going, and I hung up. I asked her if she had called the police. She said no. She said she had thought about it and decided not to. She said it was probably a scam. Those AI scams where they clone your voice from social media and call your relatives asking for money. She had read about them. She wanted me to know in case the scammer tried again, because they had her landline number now, and she wanted me to be aware that someone out there had a recording of my voice good enough to fool her for, she said, about 10 seconds until they wouldn't say what road. I told her I'd be careful. I told her to call me on my cell, not the landline, going forward just to be safe. I told her I loved her. I hung up. I sat at my desk for a long time. I want to record Dr. Albrecht that the voice scam explanation is plausible. It is the most plausible explanation. AI voice cloning is real and is used in scams against the elderly. My mother has my voice in dozens of voicemails and videos on her phone. A scammer could absolutely have produced a clone good enough to fool her for 10 seconds. I want to record that I do not believe the voice scam explanation. I want to record why. The voice on the back line on Wednesday night called me Holly, not Ms. Rensky, not the on-call provider. Holly. He used the phrasing, you know who this is. He asked me, are you home? He said he was calling from the road. The voice on my mother's landline on Thursday night used my voice and said it was on the road. A voice scam exploits a relationship. It clones a voice and uses the relationship to extract money. The voice scam targeting my mother would have asked for money. It would have said, Mom, I got into an accident. I need you to wire me $5,000 right now. Please don't tell Dad. It would have used the relationship instrumentally. The voice on my mother's phone did not ask for money. It said it needed help, and it was on the road. It did not name the road. When asked the road, it could not name the road. It just kept saying the road. The voice on the back line did not ask for medical advice. It asked me to stay on the line and talk to him. It said he was on the road. It did not name the road. It asked if I was home. I want to record that I am dictating this on a Friday afternoon, and that it is getting toward 5 o'clock, and that the sun in mid-October in Vermont sets at about 6:15. I want to record that I am not going to drive home in the dark. I am going to leave the clinic in the next 20 minutes and drive home now, and I am going to be inside my house on Hatcher Road before sunset. I am going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb between 6:15 and 7 a.m. I am not going to answer the door. I am not going to go to the window if I hear anything from the road. I want to record that I made the decision to do these things before I finish thinking about whether I believe in the rule. I made the decision the way you make a decision about a seatbelt, which is that you put it on and then you reflect on whether you needed it on, but you put it on first. The town's rule is now my rule. I have adopted it. I am not certain whether I have adopted it because I believe it is correct, or because I have been in this town for 6 weeks and the gravitational pull of a community-wide consensus is real, or because the call on Wednesday night was real and the call to my mother was real, and the rule is the right response to those calls. I am asking you on Monday to tell me which of these reasons is the one that should guide me going forward. And I am also asking you on Monday to walk me through the backline log. I want to see 10 years of calls. I want to see how they are documented. I want to know whether the documentation has a pattern. I want to know whether the calls are calls from anyone identifiable, or whether they are calls of the same kind I received. Calls without callers, voices without origin, the phrasing of distress without the substance of distress. I want to know one more thing, and this is the last thing I am going to put in this dictation, and I want you to hear it, because I think it's important. When my mother told me about the call last night, she said it was you. It was completely you. It sounded like you were crying. I want to record that the day before yesterday, on the way home from work, on Route 14, I had a moment in the car where I was thinking about my father, who died last year, and I started to cry. And I cried for about 3 or 4 minutes, alone in the car, between the Briarden line and Hatcher Road. And I pulled over once for about a minute on the shoulder of Route 14 because I couldn't see well enough to drive. I started the car again and drove the rest of the way home, and I did not tell anyone about it because it was a private moment and there was no reason to. I want to record that the voice my mother heard on her phone last night was, by her description, my voice on the road crying. I want to record that I am not certain how to interpret this. The voice scam theory does not require that the scammer know I had a moment of crying on Route 14 between Briarden and Hatcher Road on Tuesday afternoon. That is not a thing a scammer could know. It is a thing that no one knows except me and except, possibly, whatever was on the road with me when it happened, if anything was, which I had not believed until this week. I want to record that I'm going to drive home now, while the sun is up on Route 14, the same road I cried on Tuesday, and I am going to be inside my house before sunset. I want to record that I am not going to call my mother from my landline tonight. If I call her, I will call her on my cell, and I will identify myself by saying something that no clone of my voice could know. I will tell her the name of the cat we had when I was 11, which is Plumber. Name that because my brother could not say plum without adding a B at the end. I will say, Mom, it's Holly. The cat's name was Plumber, and she will know it's me. I am going to ask her tonight to do the same, to tell me every time she calls the cat's name. I am going to set up that call and response with her tonight by text, before sunset, before the phone becomes a thing that the rule applies to. Dr. Albrecht, I want to be honest with you about something, and I want it on the record because I am going to come into the clinic on Monday, and I am going to ask you direct questions, and I want you to know, when I ask them, that I have already arrived at the answer, and that I am asking the questions as a courtesy. I think you have known about the backline for 10 years. I think the previous PA, Megan, who left in August, knew about it for the 4 years she was here and was briefed when she started. And that the brief was not given to me when I started, because Megan, when her exit conversation with you, told you something that made you decide to wait and see whether I could figure it out without being briefed, the way she had to figure it out. I think the patients of this clinic have been quietly, kindly, professionally checking on me, Marlene, Russell, Charity's mother, Dwight, Eleanor, to see how far along I am in the figuring out. I think Dwight's comment about Hatcher Road being a town road, not a state road, was a real piece of practical guidance from a man who has lived here all his life and who recognized that I was going to need to know. I think Lacey patched the call through to me on Wednesday night, not by mistake, but because the backline protocol has a provision in it for the new provider, when the new provider is far enough along to receive one call so that the new provider knows or directly what the backline is for. I think she apologized because the apology is part of the protocol. I think the apology is what makes the patching feel like a mistake to the new provider, so that the new provider does not feel singled out, so that the new provider can interpret what they have just heard as an institutional error rather than as the institution's first deliberate communication with them on the matter. I think the rule about the road is real. I think it has worked for a long time. I think it has worked because the town has adopted it, and because the adoption is what the rule requires, that everyone follow it every night without asking why, so that the rule does not become interesting, so that the rule does not become a question, so that the rule does not become an answer. I think I am being asked to join. I think the asking is gentle because the town is not unkind. I think the asking is patient because Briarden has been doing this since before phones. I think the asking comes through the patience and through the dispatcher and through my mother's landline ringing at 9 in the evening with a voice that was mine but had no road to name, and through this dictation, which I am making now and which I am going to leave for you on Monday morning. I think the question I have to answer is whether to keep the dictation or to delete it before Monday and to come into the clinic on Monday and not ask you about the back line and not ask about Megan and not ask about the protocol and to simply pick up the backline log when you hand it to me and to begin reviewing the calls and to not ask why. I want you to know that I am dictating this at 4:52 p.m. on Friday, October 18th. The sun sets at 6:17. I am going to drive home now. I am going to leave this dictation file in the system. I am not going to delete it. I am going to come in on Monday and ask you the questions. I want to record finally that I am not afraid. I want this to be in the record because I think it matters and because I think you will want to know. I am not afraid because the rule is small. The rule is not to answer. The rule is something I can do. It is something I am, in fact, already doing. I have been doing it for 2 days since Wednesday without anyone telling me to. I figured the rule out by being asked, gently, by people who have been asked themselves, by their parents, by their grandparents in this same valley, and for as long as anyone has lived here. Dr. Albrecht, this is Holly Rensky, signing off the dictation at 4:55 p.m., October 18th for review Monday morning. I will see you Monday. End of dictation.